I have a little presentation to start with, but you know what I like to do during webinars, and that's not give very long presentations. This one is about 5 slides, and after that we'll take a look at the actual product. So today we're talking about FileTrain, and FileTrain is a solution from Laidback Solutions. That's a Swedish company with a very laid-back attitude, as the name implies. That has been active in graphic arts since 2002. And on this slide, you can see an overview of the products that they have. If you haven't looked at their site or at their products, I would encourage you to have a look at not just FileTrain, but also the other products. I don't want to go into too much detail, but basically Feedback and Sherpa are products that work with metadata and allow you to work with the metadata that you find in PDF documents in a very clever way. For example, Colorman is a plugin that will allow you to automate color management solutions within Quark Express / InDesign. That, for example, works together with the Alpical Claro solution that we distribute as well. So basically that would allow you to color manage all of the images that you have in an InDesign document that you're editing, which can be a very efficient way of working. And then Cargo is an ad portal with built-in pre-flight, of course, again, but a very full-featured and very flexible ad portal built with modern technology. And it's actually also worthwhile looking at it if you receive advertisements from outside or inside that you have to deal with. But the product we're talking about today is FileTrain, and FileTrain is an automation solution, and that should ring a bell. It's not the only automation solution on the market, and I will talk a little bit about that in a minute. What do I call an automation solution, and why don't I call it a workflow? Well, it's an automation solution because it allows you to automate repetitive standard tasks. Typically, those tasks that drive people crazy because they have to do them manually, and that also, because of that, cause them to make a lot of errors, and errors typically cost a lot of money in a workflow. So FileTrain is a solution that will allow you to automate, for example, the list of tasks that you see on the slide here. Let's start with what is sometimes the least popular item, perhaps, price. FileTrain as a product is fairly simple. There is a purchase price, and the purchase price, well, you can see it on there. It's of course not 2,500 euros, but slightly less, which I think for the type of solution that we're talking about is very reasonable. And it's also an all-in price, meaning that there are no, at least in this version of FileTrain, there are no modules or options. It's an all-in-one purchase price. It's a regular product, so you buy a license for a server. The only thing that you have to add to that, but that's the same for all server products that we distribute, is an SMA contract, a software maintenance agreement that includes maintenance and updates, and that's always, I think that's now standard for all of the products that we have as well. It's 20% of the purchase price of the product. And the first year maintenance is always required. You can decide to stop that maintenance agreement for later years, although in practice we see that most people simply prolong that so they can continue to profit from updates and upgrades to the product. It's a server license, which means that you activate it on a server, whether a real or a virtual one. That doesn't really make that much difference. And if you need 2 servers, you need 2 copies. It's actually quite easy. And it runs on what you would expect just about Mac OS 10, Windows, and Linux. It can run as a 32 or 64-bit version on Windows, for example, and it doesn't require a server operating system. And with that, we mean that you could run it on Windows 7 just as well as on Windows 2008. And as long as we're talking Windows, it can also run as a true service, which means that nobody is required to be logged on to the server to work with the application. So you can see that this is all quite straightforward, and that makes my life in this webinar a lot easier. Positioning, as most of you who are listening to this webinar, I can see the full list of names, of course. As most of you who are listening know, I know a thing or two about another automation product and Focus Switch. I also know a little bit about other what I would more call workflow solutions than automation solutions. For example, Codec Prinergy with the rules-based automation option. Where does FileTrain position itself towards these other solutions? Well, as you'll see from the demo later as well, there is a much less graphical user interface. But if you look at the feature set of the product, you'll see that it is a very complete feature set. So yes, we are shooting at those workflows where you perhaps need a little bit less complexity than what you get with RBA or with Switch, where the fact that you have availability to script within the product and so on gives you a very high level of flexibility. But there is a trade-off going on in FileTrain between keeping the product easy to use and easy to understand, and on the other hand, making it powerful enough to deal with the most common workflows. What we see with all of the products that we distribute, whether it be the XIO products or the CALAs or the LPCAL or the ColorLogic solutions, we see that people are very interested in having these individual solutions, but that in many cases, being able to set up hot folders is just not enough to allow them the flexibility that they need. And if you've followed my webinars about the Tucana solutions, T-Flow Production and T-Flow Approval, then I think you'll agree that those products are one particular way to solve that. They offer a more user-friendly user interface on top of what is essentially PDF Toolbox Server, a hot folder-based pre-flight and PDF correction engine. But it's still a limited product in terms of the feature set. FileTrain is a little bit different. It doesn't offer the same totally finished user interface as the Tucana products do, but on the other hand, it offers a lot more flexibility with regards to the different tasks that you need to do around this pre-flight engine or color engine. And that is things like collecting files from FTP servers, sending out notification emails with a link in it, for example, if you want to set up some approval workflow, getting attachments from emails and dealing with those. So all of those tasks that you see happening around a PDF Toolbox server or a Zebra solution or a made-to-print solution, that is what FileTrain aims to automate. And while it does, in that sense, orient itself towards the same type of workflow, the same type of customer, where you would also see in Focus Switch or the Codec Prinergy rules-based automation solution, you can definitely see from the level of complexity and also the price point that it aims at only a segment of those cases. But in many cases, what you can do with FileTrain, and you'll see that, is more than flexible enough to do the automation that you have to do in a workflow. Let me switch to the demo. I have it running on macOS 10 here. Of course, like I said, it looks and feels the same on Windows and even Linux. Essentially, what you're looking at is an overview window where I can see a real-life view of what is being done by the solution, but that also integrates all of the different configuration options for the product. As I already said in the introduction presentation, there is no visual user interface to design a workflow consisting of different steps that you drag and drop into order. Instead, what you have is one or more stations. And a station is a place where something is made to happen. If I want to pre-flight files, I'll make a station that pre-flights files. And that means picking up stuff, deciding which files need to be pre-flighted, and pre-flighting them. And that is exactly what you find in these other items that you have in the main screen. I have sources, filters, and actions. A source, to give you a very quick summary, a source is a location where I can pick files up from, and that can be a folder on a disk. It could be a network drive. It could be an FTP server. It could be an email address. It could even be a timed trigger that injects a file into one of these stations. The filter is used to determine which files or folders are picked up from a particular source and are handled. If I have a source where I have a bunch of files coming in, PDF, Word files, Excel files, PowerPoint, PostScript files, and I want to handle them individually, then I can make filters that filter out all of the PDF files and then have an action that handles the PDF files. Or I can make a filter that takes all of the folders that are coming in, or that takes all of the Word files or the PostScript files that come in, and then execute different actions on them. So the way this works is always the same. I have a station, and in that station I define where my files come from, which files I want to look at, and then what actions I want to do on those files. The remaining items that you see here are more advanced setup, and what I'm going to do is first show you a very simple station so that you get to see how this works, and then we'll look at what other things we can set up in here. So let me give you a very easy station. I'll open it up here. You can see the station window coming up, and I have these three other palettes that float next to it, which I can actually hide if that causes too much overhead. And what you see here is a reflection of exactly what I said when I talked about all of these different categories. In a station, I get to define where my files come from, and that in this case is a folder. And then I have a definition of filters, and for each filter, I have a number of actions that are executed. So it's a fairly logical and a fairly simple way of setting up different actions that will happen with the files in an input folder of a workflow. How do I define the input folder? Well, if I double-click that source, I get to see that a source has a name. In this case, I specified an exact folder on disk where the files are going to be picked up from. I could scan subfolders if I want to. There is a configuration of when that folder is being checked, and that gives me a lot of flexibility to decide how frequently this particular action or this particular source should be looked at in order to figure out whether there is something to do. And you have some additional setup, such as a safety margin that allows you to build in some safety in case a process delivers a file, but that file is not complete immediately. For example, something that you see when you start mixing operating systems. A Linux machine dropping a file on the Windows server, you almost always have to wait a couple of seconds to make sure that the file is really stable before you start handling it. So fairly straightforward. This source is simply an input folder that picks up files from a particular location on my disk. But if I go to add source, and I can add as many sources to this particular station or workflow as I want, you can see that not only do I have a folder, I can also check emails. That could be a POP3 or an IMAP email account where all new emails that come in are checked and where the attachments are dealt with. I have an FTP server that allows me to pick up information from an FTP server. I'll just select that so that you can see what the parameters are that you can set up here. So basically the server itself, user account, password, what folder it is picked up from, same safety information, and so on. And like I said, I can even set up a timer action where repeatedly at a certain time, this station will be triggered. And then once it is triggered in the action section, I can define what exactly will happen when that station is triggered. So that's the source section where you define where the files come from that need to be automated. And you can see a bunch of other more advanced areas on top. I will come back to the bucket area a little later, but like I said, I don't want to go into all of the technical details of the product at this point. Once you know where the files come from that you want to automate, the next level is these filters. And when I click the little plus sign, I get to add a filter on here. And a filter could, for example, be a filter that looks at a property of a file. And that would allow me to say things like, I want the file name to be filtered and to contain a particular value, for example, or I want to filter on file size. I want to filter on metadata that is embedded within that document. So filtering can happen either on file type, on file name, on the metadata that you have in the file, on all of these different parameters that you would logically expect to be able to filter on. So if you work with XMP metadata in your company and you want to filter on certain metadata fields, then yes, that's possible. If you work with a file naming convention, as many people do, then you can use that to filter which files are affected by a particular action. And because you can enter multiple filters and then multiple actions per filter, this is a rather flexible setup. If I look at the existing filters and I insert an EPS filter, for example, I could make two filters in this particular station where I say, well, let's change this one to file name contains PDF. And then for PDF files, I'm going to insert XMP into the file and then do some other tasks. For EPS, I want to do something different. And I could set that up, that in the case of an EPS file, PDF Toolbox is used, for example, to convert that EPS into a PDF document. So once you have the filter set up, the next stage is to decide for those type of files that have been filtered out, what are the actions that I want to execute? And let me just open the XMP action in here, which is a fairly straightforward one that tells me whatever file is filtered out and is being handled, I want to add different XMP fields in that document. So this will actually simply add XMP information to the document that is being processed, which you could use for all kinds of different purposes, for example, of course, but for example, you could say any file that is processed through this particular workflow, I'm simply going to add an XMP field to remember that that document was processed. Of course, I can have a list of actions that are executed one after the other, and in this case, the second action will then move the file to an output folder, and then there is a variable part, a subfolder that will automatically be created, and that subfolder in this case simply gets an XMP field out of the XMP information in the file. Now, this is a demo flow. What I'm doing here is inserting XMP data and then immediately using that XMP data to create subfolders. In many workflows, of course, the XMP would already be in there, and you're simply using what a different tool has been inserted. But this is, like I said, a demo workflow to show you what the possibilities are. Now, what does that mean? What does this thing do? If I go to live view and I would I would take a PDF file and then drop that into one of these folders that I have. We were looking at this station here. You can see that as soon as I put something in there, it was actually too quick to show it in the user interface itself. As soon as I put something in here, it picks up that file, and what it did is it inserted an XMP field in there for XMP nickname that happened to be Purple Penguin, and then it created a subfolder based on that XMP field and where it stored the file inside of that subfolder. So very simple, very straightforward thing to do. The reason I could insert that XMP information is because a lot of the default XMP encoding, such as the Dublin core information, for example, is known to FileTrain. So it knows what the typical Dublin core namespace is, and it knows how to deal with that. If you want to add your own XMP information, then you can do that as well. And I have one example in here that defines a field out of the Ghent workgroup add tickets. And if I look at that, what that does is it basically defines the full URI for that specification. It defines what the namespace prefix is that is used by the add ticket specification, and then it defines the name and the human readable name of the property. So if you have your own XMP specification that you use to store information in a PDF file or in any file that supports XMP, then FileTrain allows you to enter all of those definitions, all of those fields in its user interface. And from that point on, these actions that work with XMP are then able to use those XMP definitions. So that's what you find under customized XMP. The same, of course, is true for customized IPTC, where you can again define your own metadata, IPTC metadata, in this case, fields. SMTP servers is a logical one. If I want to send out email, I need an SMTP server to do so, and this area simply allows me to define these SMTP servers that I want to use. So what I've done here is simply set up the one that we use here in the office to make sure that I can send notification emails if I want to. And then the last section in here, external tools, gives you an overview of the different external tools that FileTrain connects with out of the box, and that are also installed. For example, what you can see here is that it has EXIF tool that it uses to deal with XMP information and EXIF information. It has ImageMagick installed, and it knows how to automate that so that I can use that to do all the things that ImageMagick can do with images, so converting between formats, resizing, resampling, and all of those things. And it has a link to where PDF Toolbox is installed, and I actually, in this example, installation, I gave it a link to my own folder with PDF Toolbox profiles, where those profiles that I have completed and want to use in FileTrain, I can simply export them in there and use those. If you want, but I'm perfectly happy with FileTrain using the system temp folder. If you want, you can also specify a temporary location where PDF Toolbox will store all of its cache information as well. So it knows how to connect to these installed tools, and that means that I can build a station where I automate some of these tools as well. And I'll show you one which is a very simple station that works with PDF Toolbox. Again, I have as input method here created something very simple, a folder, but of course I could put a folder in here and also 2 email addresses and 3 FTP servers. You can have as many input sources as you want. After that, I have a filter that now picks up all files, because I'm assuming that all files in that folder will need to be handled by PDF Toolbox. So what I'm assuming is that they are either PDF files or file formats that PDF Toolbox knows how to handle anyway. Of course, I could set this up differently and say that PostScript files are first converted with specific settings to PDF and so on. But here I do something very simple. All files, there is a pre-flight action according to one of the profiles that I am using. So PDF Toolbox is used to execute a profile. I'm asking in this case for a PDF report with comments, but I could just as well that I want an XML file, an XML report, and let me call that report, and it should be XML if it's an XML report. And I can specify what the destination of that report is. I'm simply going to put it in the output folder, but you can see that the action is flexible enough to allow you to put the report wherever you want it to. And that, again, you have these 2 different fields that determine where that report is going to be sent to. Well, the first is in this example, should be an existing folder somewhere on my disk. The second part can be variable, and I can use these types of variables that FileTrain supports to determine what the subfolder or subfolders will be where the report is placed. So if you want to automatically create a subfolder for all XML reports, for example, then you can do that. If you want to add a variable for the date, for example, then you can do that as well. This allows you to use one fixed folder as the most simple case, which is what I'm going to do here, but it also allows you to, on the fly, generate one or multiple levels of subfolders where you put the information. If my profile contains dynamic values, if this is a variable profile, then I can specify the values for those variables in here as well. And of course, I can also specify where the result file is stored. The most easy way to do this is by simply having 2 folders. One folder for the case where there are errors, one folder in case where there are no errors, only warnings or fix-ups, for example. But if I go to advanced, you can see that you actually have all different capabilities or all different possibilities of output separately. And I can simply, for each of these cases, have a different folder where the information is sent to. And that, of course, allows you to do things like any file that has been fixed, for example, so no errors, but fix-ups have been done, then I want to drop them into a particular folder, perhaps because someone needs to look at them or you want to run another verification algorithm on them. You can do that if you want, but in this case, I've set it up with the simple, straightforward way of doing things. And of course, if I now take a PDF file and I drop that into the input folder, or I take some more, then it will simply take these input files and process them. And I think in all these cases, I'll actually have success. So my original file is moved by the station to the original output folder, and for all of the files that have been processed with the profile end up in the success folder. Because I've specified I only wanted a report in the error case. If something goes wrong, in this particular example, I get no report. Now, this is the basic demo of FileTrain if you want. This shows you that you can automate tasks that have to do with files themselves, whether it is renaming, copying, moving from and to FTP servers, getting email attachments and processing them, sending back notification emails. All of those basic things are, of course, possible. But if you look at an action, and let me open up this list of actions that are built into the application, then you can see that it actually goes a little bit further than those simple things. There is, for example, a PDF merge and PDF split action in here. There is the possibility to work with or generate text files. You can insert XMP, you can add XMP fields to a file, as I've already mentioned. Of course, any tool that works with hot folders can be automated, but there is, next to the integration that has already been done for PDF Toolbox, there is also a command line action that allows you to automate any command line tool. And that means that anything that I would not be able to do with the built-in PDF Toolbox action, for example, I could simply automate by using this command line action and specifying building my own command line for PDF Toolbox, or any other command line tool that knows how to work with files. If you think about ColorLogic Zebra, for example, Zebra has the possibility to work through command line, so that could be integrated into the application in that way. You can see that FileTrain is capable of linking into Cargo. Cargo was the other laid-back application that is an ad portal. Well, this gives you the ability, you don't have to do that, but it gives you the ability to configure both solutions together. If you have a Cargo ad portal running, then that gives you the ability to, for example, act on the XMP metadata that comes with the advertisements when they are delivered by Cargo. If you want to see that in action, by the way, there is actually on the Laidback Solutions website, there is a download form where you can fill out information to get access to the download for FileTrain, for example. Well, that download form is actually created by Cargo, and the engine that runs behind it is a Cargo engine. And then if you wanted to automate actions at the back end of that, for example, as happens in this case, sending out emails with the download link, then that is something that could be organized by having FileTrain look at that Cargo system. So that kind of integration is already possible. There is one additional field that I want to draw your attention to, and or action, that is that bucket action. You already saw that briefly when I opened up one of the sources, if I'm not mistaken. Well, actually not here, but if I do create a was it sources of filters? I'm losing my own way now for a second. Where did I show that? When you create, and actually this is where I saw that. When you create your own actions or your own sources or your own filters, there is a mechanism to work with variables. And if we go to the FileTrain manual, then at the very end, you can see these macro tags, variables if you want. And these variables allow you to customize any field in FileTrain. That's what I wanted to show and what I was looking for. Let me take the pre-flight action again. Any of these fields where you have a yellow background in the field itself, well, any of those fields is capable of working with these variables. And this is an example. The F variable that you see here is actually referring to the file name of the file that is being processed. Well, there is a whole list of these variables that you can use to make your actions or sources or filters more flexible. And you have documentation for all of them that is very complete. So that can be used to enter some level of flexibility already. Next to that, there is the concept of a bucket, and a bucket can be on a station level, so on a workflow level if you want, or it can be on a file level. And a bucket is, as the word implies, a location where you can store information for either that station or that file. And if I look at one of these workflows that I have here, and that's what I was looking for. So in this case, what I have done is I have defined a station bucket, and I give that a particular name, and that has a value. The actions that I use in that station can work with the information that is in those buckets. In this case, I use it to create a unique ID that is specific to that particular station, and that allows me to incrementally rename every file that is processed in that station. So in this case, it's information that is connected to the station itself. And if you look at what happens with that information, if I look at one of the actions that I have in here, then it will actually increment that value that is stored with the station. So every file that is processed, in this case, simply gets an increment, automatically incremented number. It looks a little bit complicated in here, something that takes a little bit used to how these things are written down, but it's a very flexible way of storing information inside of a station, or if you're using a file bucket to store information with a file. And by doing that, you can have information that flows with a file as it is being processed through FileTrain, so that different stations or different actions that work on the same file know what that information is, can work with that information that travels with the document. So the two concepts, buckets and what is called macros in FileTrain or variables in FileTrain, those two concepts work together very closely in many cases. The variables giving you a way to add flexibility to a source or an action, and the bucket giving you a way to storing information together with a station or together with a file. Okay, that is about what I wanted to show you in this particular webinar. Like I said, there are definitely a number of examples that I would like to go into in next webinars. One of those, for example, is an approval workflow where PDF Toolbox is used together with a web server to create a very simple but effective online approval system for clients. That's one webinar that you'll see appear on our agenda shortly. If you have other ideas or other things that you would like to see in more detail, then just send us an email and I will be happy to go into those as well. To give a little bit of a quick recap, we talked about FileTrain, an automation solution from Laidback Solutions, very nice Swedish company. And FileTrain, as you see it here, allows you to define stations. Each station is a workflow of things that need to happen to particular documents. And for each of those stations, I can specify where the files come from, whether that's a folder, an email, a message, an FTP server, or simply a timer that is being fired every so many seconds or minutes. Every station allows me to define filters to determine which files or which folders are going to be dealt with. And that can either be a naming convention or metadata in the file or any other property of that file or folder. And then any of those stations allows me for filtered out files what actions to define what actions need to happen on that particular file. And of course, that can be built-in actions such as moving files around and renaming and copying and all of those obvious things. But of course, that can also be the automation of external tools. And in many cases, that will be the automation of external tools. FileTrain knows how to handle two open source tools, EXIF tool to work with EXIF information and metadata in general, and then ImageMagick to work with images in all kinds of ways, and that also connects and knows how to automate Kala's PDF toolbox out of the box. But any other tool that works with hot folders or command line can also be dealt with. Besides that, there is the ability, and I didn't really mention that too much, but there is the ability to work with, and I'm just looking at whether I have that here. There is the ability to work with databases as well, where you can make a connection to a database, and you have a number of predefined types here already that should cover most of the needs. And where you can either store information in a database or extract information from a database, either by calling a stored procedure or having a plain SQL code, for example. And what we see this used for is actually in both directions. It is information that is stored for a file in a database that is extracted and then acted upon. That information can be stored in a station or a file bucket again, so that it's available for next actions to work on. But we also see it used in a workflow to store information back into that database after a file has been processed. That used to be, for those of you that perhaps in the past have looked at FileTrain, the database part used to be a separate module, but it's actually simply built in and bundled with FileTrain version 6. So if you buy FileTrain, that's the capability of working with databases comes with the application. If there are any other questions that you have about the application, now would be a good time to ask them, or simply send me an email afterwards, and I will be happy to give you a more in-depth presentation afterwards, one-on-one. That's of course also always a possibility. Let me see if there are any additional questions next to the database question that weren't answered yet, but I believe I've answered all of them so far. Good. If you want to experience FileTrain, there is of course a trial version that you can download from the FileTrain website or the Laidback Solutions website, and that's the site I have open here, laidbacksolutions.se. It's a Swedish company. You have a very nice page for each of the products, including a download of a 30-day trial version. So please don't hesitate, simply download the evaluation version. If you run into any issues or questions, give me a quick email, and we'll be more than happy to help with that. Good. That leaves me with nothing else but to thank you once more for joining one of these webinars. As I said before, if you have other subjects that you want to see covered, please don't hesitate to ask. And if you want to see the recording of this webinar or any of the previous webinars that we did, you have that available on the 4Ps support portal. There is a tutorial section on there where you can see a long list of recorded webinars. Many of them for PDF Toolbox. I think that's the majority of the webinars that we have on here, but webinars for Tucana as well. You can see a PDFA pilot webinar. There are some Color Logic ones as well. And I know that Tom just did 2 LPCal Claro webinars that for which the recording still has to be cleaned up and then posted as well. So those should be available in the coming week as well. Thank you very much for joining, and like I said, please don't hesitate to contact us if you have any questions. We'll be more than happy to assist, and then I can only wish you a very nice rest of the day.